purple and the white and the white and the purple and the fans and all that good stuff. And apparently Dan Duquette spent most of his day on Monday on the phone. And home comes Steve Pearce on the back end of Wade Miley becoming a Baltimore Oriole. And here to recap all of it and put it into perspective, our resident Orioles historian and one-time Oriole coverer until he was banished to the back like myself. He is Alan McCallum on the other side of yet another trading deadline. And, the Orioles augmented. And, far be it for me to be the negative ninny in this thing. But, Steve Pearce is Steve Pearce and Wade Miley's Wade Miley. And they're going to be, it's a sort of a sideways sort of thing. But, we'll look back in 8 or 12 weeks and judge it then. Right, Alan?
Well, yes. And, if you want me to evaluate, I would tell you, well, they got an arm. Wade Miley does have an arm. He's got 2 of them. And he is a major league pitcher, and we know what Steve Pearce is. I find it interesting that they would go out and get him, and I'll be honest, it wouldn't have surprised me if they'd gone out and traded for Miguel Gonzalez, as it was as well. But again, it's a little bit of an indictment that you go out and you have to trade for a player that you had in your control, or at least certainly in your organization, in Steve Pearce. But here's what bringing Wade Miley does, or any pitcher for that matter. We were starting to see cracks in the bullpen, largely because they took 2 of their most successful long relievers in Bundy and Vance Worley and put them into the rotation. And while they seemingly gave the team a better chance to win, it was exposing the middle of the game with Despaigne, who...
Well, you can either bring those guys in, to start, or bring them into the 3rd inning when Jimenez, has to go out, right? So,
right.
Either way, you're using those guys up. And the real issue is, Jimenez isn't getting his 6 or 7 innings in every 5 days at this point, right? That's sort of a missing part of this, right?
It keeps him out of the rotation. And hopefully what it does, quite frankly, is send Despaigne back to AAA. He said he's looked okay on a few occasions, but he certainly isn't the same kind of trusted arm that we saw through much of the season in Worley and Bundy, Brad Brock a little bit earlier on in the game, even Michael Givens. I don't trust him that when he comes into the game is going to be shut down. So in theory, if one of them, either Worley or Bundy, and it looks like it's going to be Vance Worley, moves back into the bullpen, and in games where they have a chance to win, has an opportunity to come out and do that, then they'll be better. Now, that said, if Vance Worley... I'll be honest, Ness. When the Red Sox signed into the contract, they did, and a couple of years back, and then when he was taking them out from them every 5th day, I sort of smiled because I knew how much he struggled. Now, his ERA is 7, so I guess that's an improvement over Ubaldo. It's not awe-inspiring, let's put it that way, but he's a veteran, and he certainly knows the league. He knows the division. It's tougher to pitch in Camden Yards than it is at Safeco in Seattle. There's certainly reasons for pause, but he's a lefty, and they need one in the rotation. And stranger things have happened when they've brought guys in that we didn't expect to do much before. So we will have to see.
All right. So if I would have told you 2 weeks ago that this would have been the haul, like if I would have told you 2 weeks ago, well, Beltran's going to the Rangers, and the Indians are going to get Miller, and slicing and dicing all of it, and the Orioles are going to get Steve Pearce, and they're going to get Wade Miley. Honestly, for me, and this is what I tweeted, it's sort of the best they could hope for. They have no minor league. They weren't getting Chris Sale unless they were sending Jonathan Scope out, right?
Right.
Maybe at some point they could have dealt Adam Jones and, gotten someone else's starting pitcher that had 3 years left on their $23 million deal or whatever. Those are the kinds of things you can do, but they couldn't do much. And really, and this is the one day, and I love these jackasses that they call themselves Orioles fans when I'm giving like a legitimate, hey, I've been watching this for 40 years and watching Craig Lefferts and Lonnie Smith and Kevin Bass and just go down the list. Keith Moreland, we could do all of that, right?
Sure.
Over the course of years. And I also remember when it was Bobby Bonilla, when it was David Wells, when, they were doing those kinds of things as well. That was a very, 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 very short period of time where the Orioles acted like they had more money than anyone. That was probably the Davey Johnson era. Other than that, we've always been the team that can't afford Wayne Garland, can't afford Reggie Jackson, didn't want to be here. And through the decades and all of that, so picking up guys and thinking that you're going to sign David Price for $217 million, or you're going to grow a Jake Arrieta or grow a Mike Messina or steal someone else's Chris Tillman at the trading deadline. They don't have a minor league system to be able to play at the level that other teams played at this week. Contending teams, the Red Sox, the Indians, the Rangers, the Nationals before that, certainly the Cubs, have all really, really fortified over the last month. And I think we would have looked at this thing in April and May when, May kind of came along and we're like, well, hey, maybe they're going to hang in it. Maybe they'll get better pitching. Then June comes along. Well, look up. They're in first place. Well, here comes the All-Star break. The one thing that hasn't changed is they did not have the ability to call the shots on July 31st. We knew that all along, man,
Of all the periods of time, you pointed out one with Pat Gillick at the helm with Davey Johnson and probably Andy McPhail. Not in the trade deadline. I can't really think of anyone outside of Bobby Bonilla. I think Scott Erickson. Has there been a time where what they brought back was someone that really made you go, wow, that's productive? Even with Erickson and Bonilla, I mean, that really wasn't even so much for that season, but it played into the future for them.
And for both of those guys, a lot of it was about money. I mean, other teams couldn't afford those cats. That's where you could go get the best players in a deal because you had an Alex Ochoa to deal off. Or what bag of baseballs? Is Scott Klingenbeck, was he involved in the Minnesota deal?
Maybe what? Klingenbeck for Scott Erickson.
Yeah, I mean, and that's off the top of my head. I mean, I don't know anything about the Orioles. It's 23 years ago. I can't remember, what I ate for lunch today, but I can remember that crazy stuff. But, you can really count it on a very, very small way how many times the Orioles have been an impact maker, how many times they've gotten the John Lester, or they've gotten the Cespedes, or they've went and gotten a 10 or a 15 or a $20 million baseball player at the trading deadline. They haven't been that team.
They haven't been that team. Gillick and McPhail have done some interesting things in the offseason to bring in some names that were impact players, but it's never really happened in the trade deadline. And let's look. No one had any illusions that they're going to bring back anybody. I thought, maybe a Jeremy Hellickson, depending on what the Phillies wanted, although they're trying to rebuild, so you expected McPhail to want a high price tag for him. But as you said, maybe the salary dump, something along those lines. Maybe a player like a Yasiel Puig, for example, where the Dodgers are just trying to get rid of him. I mean, maybe in a situation like that, you could see the Orioles pulling that off. But other than that, I mean, there was never going to be a David Price or Chris Sale or anything along those lines coming here. There were no illusions.
It's a part of being an Oriole fan. You lower your bar. You just do. I mean, it's part of like being an Oriole fan in the Angelos era. It's like, we're not going to be the ones that win the trading deadline. We're not going to be the ones that sign David Price. It's
but
just
as you point out, it's not just the Angelos era. It's something they've been doing for a long time. I mean, that's who they are. So. And again, I will reiterate this. This is why it's so frustrating in the off season, and at times when they make decisions about players that they jettison for all intents and purposes, that can help a team like this, whether it's a Miguel Gonzalez or a Steve Pearce or letting Wei Chen go. If you're not going to be able to make that deal at the trade deadline, because your farm system is as fragile as it is, why would you let go a player like Miguel Gonzalez, who you just decided can't pitch anymore, but all he's done in his career is show you that he's more than he is? He was hurt, and maybe he's never going to be what he was, but to just say, well, we're going to go with these young guys that haven't really proven anything at the major league level, more than one or two starts at a time, just seemed foolish for a team that before any of that happened, before they lost any of those players, they knew that their Achilles heel was going to be starting pitching and that they needed to get some, and they didn't do enough to do it. If you spent all the money that they spent in the offseason to retain the players they wanted to hold on to, with the idea that we're going to contend for as long as we can through this window, but we know we can't spend. We know we're not going to be able to. We're not going to make the choice to trade the few arms we have in our farm system, the little bit of talent that we have, then why wouldn't you go out and hold on to Miguel Gonzalez, take a shot on it?
Well, look at what the Yankees did, right? They went out and dumped a bunch of money into Andrew Miller, and when the time came, they dealt him off. It was a good signing for them. They got good work out of him. He was and at the trading deadline, they send him over to Cleveland and fleece an organization and add to their stockpile. So you can even do it that way in a bad year, right? But there are lots of ways to sort of do it, but it really does kind of begin with money and scouting. And if you don't have either or both, long term, there are going to be these potholes. And they've been a better baseball team this year than I think you or me or anybody else would have predicted they were going to be back in March. They've had a lot more good fortune than bad fortune, for sure.
That they're in first place with one of the worst starting rotations in baseball is frankly amazing. It really is.
It would be very hard to replicate.
Absolutely.
In any other year, say we're going to have the worst pitching and be in first place. That it doesn't even add up. That even makes sense, right?
Well, it talks about the defense. It talks about the bullpen. It talks about their ability to hit home runs and how consistently they've done it. Now, we've seen that we're in one of those stretches, right, where very few people are hitting. They're not hitting a lot of home runs. Adam Jones saving a series notwithstanding, or at least a game in a series on Sunday against the Blue Jays notwithstanding. But this is what we talked about. The reason their offense can be so stressful to watch, that when they're not hitting home runs, they don't have a lot to fall back on. They don't have great at bats. They don't take any walks. They don't have much team speed. So when they go into a slump, it's a full out slump because they have very few fundamentals to fall back on. They're not going to play small ball. They're not going to hit a lot of sacrifice flies. They're not going to be on base enough for it to matter. It's sort of all or nothing. And again, as you said, to be in first place with that kind of offense, and with the kind of starting pitching they have, it's a testament to Buck, his ability to move his pieces around, to preserve the capabilities of his upper echelon bullpen, and to the quality defense they play. They're what they do well. They do extremely well, and the things that they have faults in, they show when it's going bad. They show up in spades. So. It's always sort of an aberrant year when the Orioles are doing this, but they've done it fairly consistently under Buck, and that's a testament to him being able to get the most out of the players. So they didn't come up with much. We'll see what happens with Wade Miley. We'll see.
That's what I would say. They didn't come up with much. I'm not urinating on Steve Pearce, who was a fine Oriole, but he is what he is, and it will be, and he will be a nice piece for them if he comes in and hits 274 and shows a little pop. And I can totally see Steve Pearce winning a baseball game for them in Boston in September somehow, some way, with some 3-run home run or a double down the line in the 7th. I would not bet against Steve Pearce. And the Wade Miley thing, I'm with you. I look at it and say, well, he's a major league pitcher. He's not Tyler Wilson or Mike Wright or some guy you're taking a flyer on, but I don't know what 10 starts we're going to get out of him over the next 8 weeks, right? What are we looking to get out of him? You'd love for him to be 6-2 with a 3.3, right? At the rest of the way. But if he were 5-3 with a 4.41 ERA, and out of the 10 starts, 7 of the starts he got them to the 6th inning, right? I'm making that up, but that sounds like Wade Miley to me if you look at the bulk of his career, right?
I think you made the most important point about the whole thing, that if Wade Miley, whether he has a 3 ERA or a 5 ERA, the odds say that he's probably going to be more consistent than Ubaldo Jimenez with a 7 ERA. Does that translate into 5 innings with 4 earned runs, 5 earned runs? Does that mean that, what I hope it means? Here's what I hope it means. Here's what I think you could realistically hope that it means. That in the 2nd inning, he hasn't thrown 60 pitches and walked 4 guys and given up 4 runs, and you're still trying to figure out how you're going to get through another 3 innings before you can use your bullpen so it doesn't blow up. If he can get you through 4 or 5 innings with 4 runs given up, in theory, that still gives the Baltimore Orioles, as they're typically look at on a consistent basis, and not completely obliterating the team's opportunity to stay in a game, like we've seen with Ubaldo, like we saw with Mike Wright. which we saw from Tyler Wilson from time to time. And quite frankly, we've seen from Kevin Gosman more than I would have thought was going to be the case through the course of this year. Not all the time. He's had a better season, but certainly had some blow-ups that are worthy of looking at his future. But I think that's what you can hope for from Wade Miley. And if that is the case, then what you see is then a Vance Worley coming in behind him and sort of settling it down in the middle innings, in the 6th, 7th, maybe the 8th inning, so that the offense that does a lot of damage in those innings for the Orioles can come back and either, if they're tied, get the lead, or get them caught up, so that some kind of late inning thunder shows up and gives them a chance to win the game. I think that's the most you can really expect.
Alan McCallum talking all things Orioles baseball on the back end now of the trading deadline. And, Alan, I'd be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to talk about the other trades, the other deals, and the other places, because ultimately, the deflated feeling I feel as an Oriole fan, and I'm wearing my Bill Hagee Oriole T-shirt tonight, I would just say this. The real depressing part is that these other teams really did get better. Now, look, it's always a cautionary tale, right? I mean, these trading deadline deals, we can already look at Drew Pomerantz, we can already look at James Shields and say, what have they contributed? And both of those guys, the Orioles should have crawled across broken glass to pick those guys up before they get Wade Miley, right? Like, if you're telling me in June someone's going to get Shields, someone's going to get Pomerantz, someone's going to get Miley, I'd say we'll be the one getting Wade Miley, right?
Right.
But that does not mean that over the next 10 starts that he cannot come and find himself here, find that the ballpark's comfortable, the team's comfortable, they're put in a good position. Maybe on those nights the team scores 8 or 10 runs like they haven't done for Gosman and some other ways. And maybe he's a good influence on Gosman. Maybe he's a good guy to have around. I know this. He's on his 4th team in 4 years. So,
right.
That plays into it. But the real story for me is that these other teams managed to get better baseball players on July 31st, and even prior to that, in the case of the Red Sox, the Nationals, Cubs, a bunch of teams, that the Orioles really did dumpster dive here. But other teams, I'll look at it, and not every deal is a John Lester deal, right? I mean, where you think it's going to put someone over the top and it goes the wrong way. I have a feeling Carlos Beltran's going to be a real nice pickup. I have a feeling that Andrew Miller's going to be a real nice pickup. And I don't know what that means in October, for teams that already, I would think Texas and Cleveland, if they're not playing in October, something really weird happened to begin with. But then it's going to be about how those guys perform once they get there.
Well, there's a lot to go through. First off, I will tell you the thing that surprised me the most is that the Yankees traded Andrew Miller. I expected Chapman to go. It didn't surprise me with Carlos Beltran at the point of his career. But I was really surprised that they traded Andrew Miller. I think it was the right thing to do. Don't get me wrong. That's a team that needs to be blown up. And as I understand it, the prospects that they have received back through all those, Ivan Novo goes to the Pirates. The prospects they've brought back are thought upon very favorably throughout baseball. So, I mean, this could be a team that could be getting better, in the next couple of years fairly quickly.
Well, I saw a stat. They have not had a top 5 pick in 25 years,
right?
And they picked up 2 of them in the dealings that they made this week. So, that's a pretty substantial thing, and especially it should be alarming to an Orioles fan who, again gave up another first-round draft pick for Gallardo a couple months ago, right? So,
right. So, I mean, I think they did well, and I think a couple weeks ago we read that there was a power struggle between Cashman and the Steinbrenners about what they wanted to do, and I think in the long run they should be happy. They will be happy that Cashman won it. The debate, because I think that team's going to be better off. But it did surprise me once they traded Chapman. I didn't think they were going to move any more of that bullpen because it was a pretty nice piece for them. But they made it the right choice for themselves, given where they are. I don't think there's any doubt the Texas Rangers are going to be looked upon as the on paper winners of the trade deadline. Getting Luke Roy from the Brewers and bringing in Beltran, and they need to do something because Prince Fielder's going to need surgery, and it looks like he's going to be out for the rest of the season. So they needed another veteran bat, and amongst some young guys and some special stories that are happening in Texas right now. And I think that they certainly put themselves in position to maybe not run away, but certainly distance themselves from the Houston Astros and a couple of the Seattle Mariners who have been sort of up and down all year. I don't know. I mean, the Dodgers, every time something goes wrong to them, they just go out and find pieces to make it better. So they made the trade with Tampa Bay to bring in some arms, and I don't think they're going to catch the Giants, but I think that with Kershaw out and not knowing when he's going to come back, certainly one of the biggest blows that we've seen in baseball for the last month or so. Getting some additional arms to help try to augment that with the hope that he might be able to come back at some point in the season puts them in a pretty good spot, to say the least.
And we're going to be seeing the Rangers the next couple of days, too. So,
right.
We're going to see the freshest version of them over the next 72 hours. And, they along with Cleveland, are now poised to say, we expect to be in the World Series this year. And that's what I want my franchise to say. On July 31st. That's what I want to hear when I haven't won a championship, and I've never had a parade as the Rangers and the Indians can both be a part of in this lifetime. I mean, at some point, you'd like to win and when you're playing 600 ball, but you have to have the minor league organization, and they did, right?
No question. It takes – you get to a point in your history where you say, okay, we just have to say we have to go try to win this. When you ask people to hurry up and wait, and sit and wait, there comes a point when you say, look, it's time to try and put up or shut up and make this thing happen. And whether you're the Rangers, if you're the Rangers in 4 or 5 years ago, you were a perennial World Series contender, you came so close to winning it, to have your heart broken by the Cardinals, what was that, 5 or 6 years ago now, you certainly are in that situation. And if you're Cleveland and, it's been 50 years since you were really had the shot. Well, I guess that's not true. I mean, the Indians and the
it's going to be a great postseason either way, right? Because it's not the usual suspects. I mean, really, other than the Giants, who they're teetering a little bit, and we'll see them next week. They're seeing the Nationals this week as well. Any other combination here of Cleveland, Texas, Washington, the Cubs, the Orioles. These are all dreamer franchises for the most part, right?
Well, you say okay. So here it is. You say that, right? But that Major League Baseball has had more shake-up in their postseason than any other of the major sports, more than the NFL, more than the NBA, more than the NHL.
Yeah, and everybody sort of gets one cup of coffee. Colorado gets one turnaround. Tampa gets one turnaround. Detroit gets a turnaround. The White Sox had one turnaround. Even the Astros made the World Series. So, I mean, I'm hearing you. I'm with you. I'm just saying it's going to be...
It's going to be fun.
It's going to be fresh. It's going to be nice. I mean, the Cubs fans just think they're going to win the World Series. I always say to them, I hope you win Game 1. I mean, you better win Game 1. Yeah,
I will tell you of so many of the things. One of the other traits I don't understand, the Matt Kemp thing going to the Atlanta Braves. I don't understand what the Braves are doing. They've traded off a ton of guys. They were a franchise that had issues, and they needed to tweak some things, and they decided to blow it up. And
would the Orioles have taken Markakis back if the Braves would pay him?
I'm sure Buck would love to have Nick Markakis back. Even at a diminished version of what he is, I think that Buck would love to have him back. He's one of his guys, and he would figure out a way to make that happen. Steve Pearce, I guess, sort of fits that role. Certainly less expensive, more versatile.
They weren't going to pay Markakis. That much is clear.
Right.
I mean, would the Braves have wanted to? The Braves are stuck with him. I mean, that's part of the contract thing.
Right.
I mean, you send him over, you better send $12 million with him, or $20 million, or whatever Mr. Angelos would want. Right?
You asked me a few weeks ago what I thought that the Orioles needed to do at the trade deadline, and I told you of all the things that I thought they could do, they needed to go out and find a super utility guy, a guy who could hit and play several positions well. And quite frankly, Steve Pearce, they did that. Left field, right field, first base, second base. He can sort of stand at second base. Third base, not so much. But I mean, he certainly fills several different versions of that role. And that gives them more versatility. It gives them a more diverse roster, and that's a useful thing. Particularly going down the stretch when they're going to need to rest some guys. They're going to need, there are going to be some injuries that will come along the way, or nagging things that they're trying to keep from becoming bigger injuries. Steve Pearce has battled some injuries himself this season, but he's had a really big year in terms of his offense when he's been healthy. So he did that, and that's good. So
Steve Pierce would have more value than Markakis, even dollar for
Right.
dollar, right this minute for them.
So,
right?
so right now, as much as they'd like to have Markakis back, Steve Pierce is probably a better fit for what the club needs right now. But yeah, if you ask me the question, would they take him back if the Braves were willing to pay him? I'm sure the answer to that question would be a yes.
Alan McCallum can be reached, Alan, at WNST.net. We'll be monitoring all things Texas Rangers this week. And, of course, the Orioles headed off to the south side of Chicago this weekend and out to the Bay Area next week for Oakland and San Francisco. Certainly plenty to go around, plenty of meat on the bone on the backside of the trading deadline. I am not certainly in the camp of thinking the Orioles had a bad trading deadline. Quite frankly, I think they got as much or more than I thought they would get. But it really is a time to look at the organization and say, in the year when you're loaded up to win, you had no firepower to win. And in the end, I don't think they're going to win the World Series. Time will tell. And if there's a parade and Steve Pierce is a part of it and Wade Miley's out there starting Game 6 of the World Series, come see me, as Joe Flacco would say. You can find me in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear anywhere you are. Planet Fitness also sponsors our WNST morning newspaper. That hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It's free of charge, easy to sign up at WNST.net, and powered up by Planet Fitness. Of course, any breaking news, including the Steve Pierce deal, including the deal for Wade Miley, comes to you first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. That's another awesome free service. It's what we do here at WNST.net, breaking news and putting it in your pocket. Of course, Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home as well. Big reminder, head coach Brian Billick, our head coach on behalf of the Living Classrooms Foundation and our partner here at WNST, will be with us next Tuesday night at Greenmount Station in Hampstead. Crab cakes and ice cold beer will be available in Carroll County. We'll see you at Greenmount Station with the coach. We'll be talking about Denny Green and the Ravens season and going around NFL Network and seeing different camps. Head coach Brian Billick with us at Greenmount Station on Tuesday the 9th. I'm Nestor. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere you are. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.